Hi, welcome to Open Hand Farm. I'm Penny, and I am with my friend Staci today, who has been an herbalist for 8 years and was kind enough to come and teach a class at my house. I am so excited. We have like 20 people wanting to come and even had to make a waiting list, and she didn't think we'd get anybody, but we did. So tell us what you're going to be teaching today, just basic.
So we're going to be looking at some culinary herbs, in particular parsley, sage, rosemary, and thyme, which are synonymous in culinary herbs, but also their history. And we have some interesting facts to learn about their history, as well as their medicinal uses and how we use them in our herbal practice today.
Perfect. All right. Well, I am so excited. We will get everybody in here and get this class rolling.
You understand that I'm not giving you healthcare advice. The ideas that we will discuss today do not constitute medical advice. No state or federal authority in the United States licensed herbalists. These discussions are for educational purposes only. Everybody's body is different, so the things we will discuss may or may not apply to you. However, it will give you information that you can research on your own as a reminder that your good health is your right and your own personal responsibility. Whether working with an herbalist, your doctor, information you read or hear in any form, the final decision when choosing any course of therapy is always yours. And finally, don't believe a word I say. Do the research yourself and know that what you are putting in your body and the therapies that you choose for your own body are right for you. My name is Staci. I am from Tennessee. We're in the process of relocating to this area, to Homestead. But again, I have been studying herbalism for 8-9 years. I'm still a student and hope to be a student my whole life. I have a main focus in my practice is in holistic herbalism and to some degree the vitalist practice of herbalism. You'll hear me talk about things like heat and cold and wet and dry and lax and tense. Those are constitutions that every person has in their body. You're either hot or cold at any given time. You're either dry or wet at any given time, or you're lax or tense. We even have phrases in our culture that reflect those things. Well, he was just hot-headed. We will be discussing that because the plants as well also have constitutions, and they have affinities for certain parts of the body, and they will create certain conditions in the body or help alleviate certain conditions in the body. So you'll hear me discuss that. Let's first talk about history of herbalism as a whole. We know that there were cave paintings of herbs anywhere in 13,000 and 25,000 BC. That's a long time ago, almost 30,000 years ago. It's a long time. The Egyptians had writings about herbs in around the 28th century, and the Sumerians, who were very prominent in the cultivation and study of herbs, that was around the 26th century. So by 700 BC, Greek merchants were trading herbs in the markets of Athens. Were like marjoram, thyme, sage, and then around 400 to 500 BC. And I say that because when I was doing the research, I was seeing a lot of things about in 400 BC that Hippocrates did whatever it was. But he wasn't even born until 460 BC. So somewhere between 400 and 500 BC, Hippocrates documented around 400 herbs and their uses for common illnesses in that time. He is now considered the father of modern medicine. The study of plants and their uses continued for several centuries until when the colonists came to what we now know as the United States, or to North America. They brought seeds with them that were useful, and they planted those when they came, but they also continued to learn about new herbs that they were not familiar with from the indigenous people. The Arawak taught Columbus about cayenne pepper and how that was good for the cardiovascular, circulatory, It was good for the stomach, and it was also good, and today still is, used for topical pain. The Cherokees taught the settlers about goldenrod and how that could be used for fevers. There are a lot of wonderful benefits for goldenrod. The Sioux helped the frontier settlers learn about echinacea. Now we have a more expansive use for echinacea now. We've learned more about it and we know that it is good to boost our immune system. But they used it for wound care and snake bites. And so the Sioux taught the settlers how to treat their wounds and their snake bites with, and there were a lot of snake bites because there were, settling the frontier, a lot of snakes. So we know that herbal medicine in that time was so vitally important. It wasn't as if there were doctor's offices and walk-in clinics or emergency rooms. The people had to know, it was vital that they be able to identify or how to prepare and use the herbs that they were gaining knowledge of in order to help their families and their friends and their communities stay healthy and to overcome illnesses that would have been common in that time. Most of the time we would find that the women were the healthcare providers in the families and in the community. They would have gardens right outside their door. We coin now as a kitchen garden. Those gardens were there, one for convenience, because if they needed an herb, they could just go right outside their door and get it, but also for safety, because there were dangers in that time settling new areas. So they would have wanted those things that they needed the most to be close to them. When they prepared the herbs in that time, they would have dried the most useful herbs to use in the wintertime when they didn't have access to those. There are a lot of herbs in the wintertime that you can harvest and use for medicine. There is an abundance of them in the spring and the summer and the fall. So they would have harvested those, dried those, or prepared them in either a ferment. For instance, parsley. Parsley is not really an herb that dries well. You can dry it, but some of its nutrients don't express well when it's dried. It needs to be fresh, and we'll go through that. Fermenting your cabbages and things, adding parsley to those, not only adds nutrients to it, it's antimicrobial in your ferment. So they would have added herbs to their ferments as well as drying them, and if they had access to oil, they could infuse them in oil, but more often than not, they were dried. Even Thomas Jefferson, the third president, had an extensive herb garden. He kept garden books, and those have been passed down through time. His daughter also kept books on the garden and was basically his right-hand woman at Monticello. They had extensive gardens. So it wasn't just the common people who were so impressed with the use of the herbs. Herbs were for everybody. It was every man's medicine. Let's talk about herbs for culinary use, because there's going to be some crossover, but it more specifically divided in definition alone, honestly. Your culinary herbs differ from herbal medicine herbs by the fact that culinary herbs are distinguished by the leafy green parts of plants. And spices would be the seeds and the berries and the bark and the roots and the fruits of plants. So herbs and spices are distinguished as different in culinary uses, whereas in herbal medicine, every part of every plant that is useful, that can safely be consumed, would be considered used for herbal medicine. The first medical school that was opened in the United States, there were some in UK that were very rudimentary, but the first medical school that we had in the United States was in 1765. And there were only 2 classes that were offered, and one was anatomical lectures and a theory of physics. The doctors that started that school were actually graduated from medical school in the UK. The first drug that was developed was actually 40 years after the first medical school, which was in what is now known as the University of Pennsylvania. The first drug was developed by a German scientist, and this may not surprise any of you, by Dr. Frederick Sturter. He developed the active ingredient from opium, and he named it morphine. He named it morphine after the god of sleep. The reason that I bring up the medical school and the drugs is because a lot of the drugs that we know, even the opium is part of what? From the poppy plant. So even morphine has its origination in plants. A lot of the drugs that are on the market today and that have been on the market since the beginning of pharmaceuticals have been derived in some part from plants or in something that is natural, like a fungus and an antibiotic or a plant and a drug. But something in nature has been used in some part to develop the drugs that we have. Culinary herbs have been added to food for centuries. It wasn't that they were used as medicine and then someone decided to add them to food, although that is kind of what happened. Because if it's a good medicine, then the best way to get it is to throw it in my food. Just throw it in the food. But there were specific reasons why some herbs were added to certain foods. The main reason was to either mask or destroy odors caused by rotting meat. In medieval times, there was no refrigeration when the Greeks and the Romans were conquering the world. So they would have required something to disguise the scent or the taste of these bad meats. And herbs would have done that. Not only that, but they bathed, but most of the time they bathed with herbs. They would take baths full of rosemary or full of thyme. Mostly rosemary. Rosemary is the main one, but there were other ones. They would adorn their heads with rosemary, especially the scholars in later times. They would make wreaths of rosemary and put it on their head to help them study, because we'll learn more about that. But rosemary is the herb of remembrance. It helps you to increase your memory, so therefore they would use it to help them study. They would also use it to deal with bad household odors. You can actually just take the herbs, soak them in a vinegar solution for a week or so, then strain it, or you can even leave the herbs in it, and then just use that for a cleaner. And it's going. Sage. Let's look at sage. Sage's botanical name is Salvia officinalis. Salvia, when we talked about constitutions, Salvia officinalis is a warm, dry, and tonifying herb. Tonifying, it means it's going to take weak tissue and it's going to give it some structure. Here's what I would like for you to do. In front of you, somewhere, it should be a little bowl with sage in it. If you want to, pinch off a little piece and chew it in your front teeth, and then just let it move around in your mouth and see what you're tasting. Let's see what you're tasting. It has a strong flavor. First thing, what do you smell? It has a pretty strong aroma. And it's warm. You can tell the kind of a warmth in the smell. Okay, so it's very aromatic. So the taste is an aromatic taste. It's also drying just a tiny bit as you chew on it. You're not developing more saliva while chewing it. It's kind of drying it. So it's astringent. It has an astringent taste. After you've chewed on it for a few minutes, you're going to notice that it's a little bitter. And then if you remove it from your mouth and then move your tongue around, it's a little oily. That is how sage tastes. Some types of sage can be quite prolific. I've always had it in a designated area, in a pot. And I had it with other plants, and it did not take over those plants. I'm not seeing that really being an issue. Sage is in the Lamiaceae family, and so it is the same family as mints. It is a mint. Now, you're going to know that it's a mint. One of the most predominant ways to know is that the stem is square. Sage has a diffusive and stimulant action. That means that it is going to promote, it's diffusive in that it takes heat in the body. It builds up heat and then it diffuses it out to the periphery or out to the outer part of the body. Some of the other herbs we're going to talk about do the same thing. I tried a tea of, I want to say it was rosemary last night, and my ears were like red. Sage and the rosemary are in the same family, so they're going to have similar actions. There's going to be a diffusion of heat and fluids from the core of the body outward to the periphery. It is carminative. So that is going to, and somewhat bitter and astringent, so that is going to stimulate digestive secretions. Hence, there's a reason why we work with sage with our Thanksgiving dinner. Why do you think that would be? Causes a secretion of digestive liquids, the bile, it helps the liver to secrete things. So it is going to add what we need with those heavy meats. They would have added these herbs to the meats to disguise their bad odors or the fact that they were going bad. But over time, we've learned that these herbs actually help our body to digest those heavier foods very well. Sage is connected with wisdom and knowledge and the ability to convey that wisdom and knowledge in a tempered way. The word sage means healthy, heal, cure, and save. All of those words are associated with sage. Along with basil, sage was used in embalming fluid in Egyptian times. It's considered an herb of longevity, of long life, even for some immortality. Sage is particularly effective at helping the body to break down dietary fats, and we talked about that. It's going to release that bile, which is going to help break down the fats. It also is a warming nervine. Does anyone know what a nervine is? A nervine is going to be for your nervous system. It is particularly good at heating up cold constitutions and conditions. So let's say you have a cold. There's a reason that a cold or a virus, a cold virus is called a cold, because in the body, it is a cold condition in the body. Those bacteria or those viruses require cold to proliferate. So if you heat the system up, and sage is going to help heat the system up. In many ways, you can use it in a steam. You can use it in a tea. You can use it in your food. Sage is going to heat the system up and make it inhospitable for that virus. Along with its antibacterial, antimicrobial properties, sage is excellent in a steam. We talked about that. You can take a really strong sage tea and gargle with that, and that's going to help kill bacteria in the back of the throat, in the eustachian tubes and things like that. When you work with it to treat a condition or to get through a crisis, then you can use it with other herbs. You can add some moistening herbs, marshmallow, linden, maybe some elder flowers. You can add some other things in there that are more moistening to balance that out. If you drink it alone, it's going to dry you out. So I would be very careful and pay attention to how your body is reacting to that. Things like a gargle or to help you loosen the mucus in the back of your throat. That way you're not having to drink it and it's not getting in your system and working everything, but it's like on contact. It's working on contact. So that way if you get a little dry after 2 or 3 gargles, then you know I need to back off, or I need to add some moistening herbs here, like the ones I mentioned, or some others. It is also really good for headaches that are related to digestive issues. If you have a slow digestion and you say you eat a heavy meal and then later that day you get a headache. Well, most people actually don't relate the headache to their digestion. But if you have a slow constitution, if you have a tendency to be constipated, if you have a tendency to feel full up in your higher up in your body after you eat a big meal, that is an indication that you may have a slower digestive system, and that sometimes can cause a headache. Sage is great for that. It's great for being able to deal with that slow digestion and to relieve the headache and allow the blood to flow. You can use dry or you can use fresh. I actually prefer to use the fresh. I do have some dry. It would be maybe a teaspoon or less in about a quart of water, and that's only going to sit for 5 or 10 minutes. Now there's differences in teas and infusions. The herbs that we're discussing today, I would only use those in a tea. So no more than 15-20 minutes to steep those in hot water. Because of the volatile oils, you would not want to do a long infusion like you would a more nourishing herb like stinging nettle or the marshmallow or something like that. If you know you have a slower digestive system and you're working with something to help that, in the meantime, you can add some of these herbs to your food on a regular basis. Here's another way to use sage. This is my favorite way to use sage, is to make sage honey. You take a jar and you stuff it full of sage. You want it to be full, but you don't want it to be super dense because you want the honey to have plenty of room to get in there. Then you just pour honey in there, put it in a dark place, let it sit for a couple of weeks, up to a month or so. I leave herbs in my honey. You can strain it out, and then you can use that sage that has soaked up all that honey to make a tea. It's not going to be as strong a tea as it would be if you used the herb fresh, because you've extracted a lot of good stuff out of that sage into the honey. But it's delicious to take that spent sage with that honey all over it and make a tea with it. I'm talking about fresh in the honey, yes. Dried herbs do not express well in oil or honey. You really need the fresh plant for that. I gave you the caution that if you have a tendency to be dry, if you have a tendency to be cold, and if you don't urinate a lot, probably on the drier side, then you want to take caution with sage. You want to be careful with sage while nursing, if you intend to nurse, because it will dry your milk up. If you want to dry your milk up, go for it. Sage has some friends that it loves to be paired with, and those are rosemary, yarrow, linden, evening primrose, and wood betony. There's an old saying, I'm not sure where it came from, but it's very popular in the herbal world, and it is, sell your coat and buy betony. Because betony is that good that even if it's cold outside, you would rather have betony than a coat. Those are all plants that play very well with sage. Rosemary. Botanists started to do some more research with rosemary and found that it is actually very, very closely related to sage, which means that it would be a Lamiaceae. So its name was changed after quite a bit of debate in 2019. Its name was changed to Salvia rosmarinus. So it is now a salvia along with sage. If you're close to it, if you want to pick off a little piece, and let's talk about the taste. It is a warm, drying, and tonifying herb just like sage is. Obviously know that it's aromatic, right? It's an aromatic herb because of its volatile oils. What is the first thing you taste? Or what is the first sensation you get? It is in the mint family with the sage. It's the Lamiaceae. One of the constituents in rosemary is pinene, which is a volatile oil that is also found in pine. Yes, it has pinene in it. And camphor. Are you getting a bit of a pungent flavor? Slightly bitter. And that piney tastes kind of like a resin. Before we go over how we can apply rosemary to our lives now, there are actually some very interesting histories about rosemary that I want to share with you. Greeks and Romans, when they would go off to war, the ladies would embroider rosemary on the handkerchiefs and give them to the knights before they went into battle to give them courage and strength. Rosemary is first mentioned on stone tablets in around 5000 BC. The Egyptians used it in burial rituals. So it was adorned the bodies for part of the burial rituals. People who have tried to find information about rosemary has found it quite difficult. You have to really dig to find information about rosemary. It was documented in China during the Han Dynasty. It became common in the gardens in Britain around 1300 when the wife of Edward III was gifted some rosemary along with some other herbs. And she was so taken with it that it was planted in the gardens at the Old Westminster. There was also Queen Elizabeth of Hungary. She adored rosemary so much that she would just take sprigs of rosemary and put it in her water or in whatever she was drinking, and she drank it all the time to help with her joints. She had semiparalysis, so she would drink the rosemary infused water, and that helped with ease the pain in her joints and gave her the ability to walk again. This was the first record of an alcohol-based perfume, was when Queen Elizabeth of Hungary had Hungary water made. And so it was rosemary and water and alcohol, and she used it for a perfume. Rosemary arrives in America around the 1700s. It is mentioned in Hamlet's plays. Rosemary is part of a very special concoction. I will tell you the story, and we don't know if it's true or not, but it is a very elaborate and fun story. I like to believe it's true. During the Black Plague, there were these 4 thieves, and they would go into the homes of those who had died, or those who had left their home to get away from the plague, or those who were just out, and they would rob them. But they didn't want to get this Black Plague. So this mother created a concoction to slather on them when they went out and to slather on them when they returned to prevent them from catching the Black Plague. I'm going to pass it around. Now this one doesn't say Four Thieves, this one says Nature's Shield, but it has many of the same herbs in it. The original Four Thieves, there's no way to really know what all was in it. We know that it had rosemary, and that it had sage, and that it had thyme, and that it had some other things. Rosemary, sage, lavender, and rue. There's a lot of history about those 4 herbs. Other things have been added to it over the years, and so it has probably changed a little bit, but nonetheless, it has the same effect. I actually have like 3 or 4 bottles of that, and I keep it everywhere so that I put it on a little drop on my face mask when I go in somewhere, and I have it on me a lot. The parts that are used in cooking and medicine are called the aerial parts. The aerial parts is any part that's above the ground. So even the stems could actually be used. The stems could actually be added to vinegars and honey. If you wanted to use the leaves to cook with, and then although there's a lot of volatile oils there, so you wouldn't want to use take all of them off, then the stems can actually be put into the vinegar or the oil to extract more of the properties out. It's a warming and diffusive herb. Again, we know that it's going to bring blood and oxygen to the periphery, very similar to sage. And now that we know how closely related they are, you can assume that rosemary is going to act in the body similarly to sage, except that rosemary has a property in it that does something special. I talked about rosemary being the herb of remembrance. I'm a nurse by practice, and I worked in long-term care with Alzheimer's patients and different types of dementia. I would encourage family members to bring in rosemary plants because it would help to calm, along with lavender. That would help to calm and help the patient maintain some and bring up some of those old memories. The short-term memories were usually gone, but it would still help them to be able to flow in and out of those long-term memories a little more peacefully, and it would give the families a chance to have that calm quality time with their loved one. Rosemary is going to be working on the respiratory system. It can be added to a steam, as well as the sage for when you have a cold or a flu going on and you want to get the gunk. Do we know what a steam is? Do you remember your grandmother putting you over a pot of water? So instead of just a plain pot of water, add these herbs to it to help get those oils. They are antimicrobial and antibacterial on contact. They work on epithelial and endothelial tissue, which is your skin. We have skin on the inside and we have skin on the outside. It has to come in contact with those tissues. So doing a steam, getting it up in your ear, into your nose, into your eyes, into your mouth, breathing it into your lungs, and then after you do a steam, just scoop you some out of there and drink it as a tea, and it's going to go down and it's going to help on contact do some antibacterial, antimicrobial work on the skin on the inside of you. Rosemary can be very stimulating to those that are particularly hot and dry constitution. So the same as with the sage, you want to be very careful. Rosemary is great to aid with cancer prevention because it supports apoptosis. Do we know what apoptosis is? Apoptosis is the natural progression of cells in our body to live through their life cycle and die. And then it also helps to discourage angiogenesis. Walls in the blood vessels that feed those cancerous cells, they branch off and they continue to grow out of control to feed that cancer. It discourages the growth of those spiny little vessels that would feed cancer. So I'm not saying that it will cure cancer, but it can help prevent cancer because it aids in both of those. Thyme. It's time for thyme. Oh, I swore I wasn't going to do that.
You know you were ready. You were so excited.
Okay, thyme is going to be the little low plant. You can pinch off a sprig of that. So thyme is going to be a little different than the others. It is hot. The others are warm. Thyme is hot. Thyme is tonifying and hot and dry. Did everyone get a package of seeds? Just throw those in a pot of really good soil with some compost or whatever you got. Thyme is hot and dry and tonifying. The taste, what did you taste? You didn't like, not good. Okay, so it's aromatic and mainly pungent. It's just a very pungent herb. I personally like the taste of thyme.
Yeah.
It is also in the Lamiaceae family, which means it is a mint. There are other things besides mints in the Lamiaceae family, but is a predominantly minced. The aerial parts again are used. These are very small thyme plants. Thyme can get pretty woody, kind of like the rosemary, how the rosemary has a woody stem. The thyme can get woody also, but these are just very small plants. So we're going to see that the actions are going to be a respiratory antimicrobial. So again, it can be added to a steam. It is very, very, very drying. I'm going to tell you right now, you have to be really careful not to overdo it with the thyme. Now, adding it to your food, that is a great way to get in your system. Also doing those steams, adding it to thieves oil or your thieves vinegar. Does anyone know what fire cider is? So it is all of these herbs and some, along with cloves of garlic, horseradish. It's a tonic that work to prevent illnesses and colds and flus, and kind of just like a health tonic. But you can also use it in greater amounts for a period of time to help you through a cold or a flu. It's very pungent. It has honey in it. It has all of these pungent herbs. It also has lots of peppers. I put jalapenos, ghost peppers, chili peppers in mine. So thyme. The volatile oils in thyme, which include thymol and borneol, are really effective at killing viral and bacterial pathogens, but they have to be on contact. It has to come in contact with that tissue. So that's why it's important to do the steams and to do the gargles. I don't suggest you put thyme in your ears. Taken internally has the same time. Steams are a very important part of the protocol. I highly advise everyone to try one. Just try one to see how it feels. I will tell you, when you first take that first deep breath, when the oils hit the tissue in the lungs in the hot water, it's like a shock to the system. But if you can get past that 1 or 2 breaths, then it's like you don't ever want to come out from under there. It just feels so good. Okay. The reason I use dried is because I can get a larger amount. I would hate to use up all my fresh herb. Thyme has apigenin. Apigenin helps to build the immune system. So it's really good for the immune system. All of these herbs are. Parsley. Just take you a couple of sprigs. Now I do have the curly parsley if anyone is curious about whether they taste the same or different. So they do actually, to me, but that's just my taste buds. And I do actually prefer the curly to the flat. But you can pass this down if you want to try both. What do we taste when we taste parsley? Did I say celery? I said celery. So what do you taste? Taste celery. A little more brighter of a flavor. Parsley is actually in the Apiaceae family, and its Latin name is Petroslinum crispum. The petro part means rock, and the solenum means celery or crispy leaves. It came from the Mediterranean, and it loves to grow. Its native habitat was like cliffs, rocky walls, sides of mountains, rocky mountains. It likes to grow in rocky places. Parsley likes well-drained soil. So this is an interesting little history tidbit about parsley. Parsley was very commonly used as an adornment for the victors of the Isthmian Games. So the Isthmian Games were also termed the Death Games. They were kind of like Olympic games that were played right after the death of someone important. They were put on to honor the recently deceased person. Parsley was very commonly used to adorn the heads of the victors of those games. Parsley is full of flavonoids. We know that flavonoids are those components or constituents in plants that are going to help to give us longevity and keep our cells in check and keep our stressed cells in check. Apigenin is a very common flavonoid in all of these plants, also referred to as an antioxidant. Are you familiar? You've probably heard that term. Everywhere you go these days, we hear about natural this, and we need antioxidants. We need help with stress. Parsley is actually very packed with antioxidants. For cancer, it helps to reduce the inflammation and calm the stressed cells, so that those cells in our body that could turn cancerous don't. We have cells that turn cancerous and our body just goes, no, you're not supposed to be there, get out of here. Foods like parsley are going to help the body to continue to do that work and to be able to read those cells as you don't belong here. The apigenin in parsley helps with neuron formation. So it's going to enhance memory and also the ability to learn new things. There is actually research going on now with apigenin with treatments for Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, schizophrenia, and dementia. 10 sprigs of parsley a day give you 100% of the vitamin K you need to maintain strong bones. We hear a lot about the calcium, and you need calcium. Here's the thing about calcium. Does anyone know what chalk is made out of? It's made out of calcium, 100% calcium. What happens if you crack chalk? It's going to break very easily. So do you want strong bones with calcium, or do you want pliable, flexible, resilient bones? So you're going to need vitamin K, D3. There is calcium in your bones, but the minerals and other nutrients that are that give us our bones the flexibility are important. That's why I get so nervous when I hear women say that they're on a calcium supplement, because I'm like, you're making your bones brittle, not flexible, not pliable. Sometimes strong isn't the thing we want. Sometimes we need that pliability. And when I fall, I want to know that my bones are pliable. Parsley contains 100% of your daily need for calcium in 10 sprigs of parsley. This is one.
Okay.
This is about 10. Throw it in your food here and there, your salad. There is a constituent in parsley. Folate is destroyed by heat. So if you want to get the folate that you need from parsley, you would need to eat it raw. Parsley is also known to help with weight loss. Do not go crazy, because in too high quantities, it can cause an issue with your liver and your kidneys. So while this much a day is great, and even this much a day would be okay. Anybody ever heard of tabbouleh? Tabbouleh is made primarily with parsley. Parsley is the green in tabbouleh. Bulgur wheat, tomato. Some people put tomatoes in it, some people don't. I love it with tomatoes in it. Garlic, onions, parsley, feta served with it, but not, I don't ever put it in it. Mint. Yeah, you can do the mint with the parsley. Yeah, it's great. It's great. It's a Middle Eastern dish. Who has arthritis? Anybody have arthritis?
Yes.
Any type of, I have psoriatic arthritis.
I have rheumatoid.
So it reduces arthritic symptoms. It is so highly anti-inflammatory with the vitamin C, the beta carotene, A and E vitamins, that it helps to alleviate some of those arthritic pains that you have. As far as the constitution of parsley, it is cool and I want to say slightly moistening. And it is tonifying. It also helps with boost the immune system because of the vitamin A. It is going to help us to protect our white blood cells, which are vital in being able to fight infections. Ways to use it: it is great as a finishing herb. So you can throw it on top of a soup or on top of a stew. You can make a tea of it. I have had a tea of parsley and it is very tasty. I like the tea better dried with the dried parsley. Again, you can add it to other dishes, salads. It does aid with digestion, but it also does something very important. If you're on a date and you really want to eat that, it actually neutralizes bad odors. So it was used also in homes to prevent bad odors. Like this would be a great deodorant. If I can just share the smudge with you briefly. Does anyone have any respiratory illnesses or diseases that would make smoke an issue? When we're talking about these antibacterial, antimicrobial properties of the herbs, some of them are expressed very well in smoke. You've probably heard of sage smudges, and you've probably heard it in a sense of a spiritual or a connotation that might not necessarily a physical, but a spiritual connotation. I have been using sage smudges for years, not in a spiritual way, but actually in a physical way, because when there is illness or when there's a change in the seasons from warmer to colder, then it is time for a smudge. Rosemary has been wrapped into bundles and smudged as well. Sage just happens to be the one I have. And in a smoke, it will get into the recesses and around the room and on surfaces and kill bacteria and microbes. This is dried sage. It would have been held like this, held together, and then wrapped. And you can see here where the stems are cut off. Penny, would you mind to walk around the room just once to kind of get the aroma in the air. As she comes around, tell me what your experience. It's different than the turkey dinner sage, right? It's a totally different feel, a totally different experience. As it disperses, you will kind of have a sense of well-being. If you can just, normally what I would do in a room at my house, I would just light it, go around, make sure it's everywhere, and then put it out. If you pay attention to your body, what is your body doing? What are you feeling? Feeling a coolness right in here, right? It's actually heat that you're feeling, not cold. It feels cool on the outside. It's because the heat is starting to rise up and disperse out of your body. Feel your face. Does your face feel warmer? Ladies, thank you so much.